Welcome in, my friends, to another edition of the Gardening Simplified show with me, Rick Feist, and Stacey Hervella. Yes, she doesn't talk to her plants. No, she doesn't have to. They understand her.
We have a telepathic relationship.
She speaks their language on a first name basis. Episode 4 today, Stacey.
Can you believe it? It's been a month.
It's been a month. And I've already learned so much from you, and I know from my friends, too, who have listened to the show. It's been a kick in the plants doing the show with you and learning from you. And for our listeners across the fruited and rooted plain here on the Gardening Simplified show, I guess my first question right off the bat today to you, Stacey, would be it's October. It's now October. Do you have GF? Do you have GF? Gardening fatigue?
I have had GF probably since about the beginning of August.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And it happens every year. It's totally predictable. And I always have to laugh because the season does have such a cycle. You know, come spring, you're just raring to go. You can't get enough. You're in the dirt all day long, working your buns off. And then summer comes along and you're done with the watering. And even though my garden has a lot of native plants that look really great in summer, you know, everyone's just like, ugh, I'm just done, just ready for a break. And it's not that I'm tired of the garden. Like, I love being outside and seeing the plants. And, you know, I still have hummingbirds visiting my garden. But, yeah, you're a little bit over the work. And I think that's totally okay and totally normal. How about you?
Well, you got to push through that GF. You know, the great thing about fall is that the weather is great for working out in the yard.
It is. It's very amenable, and that is very helpful because my tomatoes definitely have GF.
Yes.
And they are being evicted this weekend. So I'm
zucchini,
grateful for the weather.
Well, you know, some of it comes down to how big is your garden and how do you define garden and what is a yard and what is a garden and how do you define it? According to the National Gardening Association, the average size of American vegetable gardens are 600 square feet. Although they're saying most people have a garden that's about 96 square feet, so that's 12 feet by 8 feet, which is manageable. But read an interesting article this past week about how you define a garden and a yard and how you apply that definition. I mean, you know, if 55% of households in America have a garden, define garden. I mean, if it's one pot with a flower in it, I suppose it could be a garden, right?
You know, it's a great question. And I was really glad that you sent that article over because it's a conversation that we have a lot here on the marketing team at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs. Are people gardeners? Are they landscaping? Are they just decorating outdoors? And that means something different to everybody. To me, personally, a garden is definitely just a collection of plants. And that might be just one plant. That might be several hundred plants. And to me, the nature of the plants, whether they're vegetables or trees or shrubs or perennials or annuals or all of the above, any combination thereof, to me, it's a garden. But I know that people have very individual definitions of what a garden is to them.
Oh, no question. And according to this article down south, if you're south of the Mason-Dixon line, a garden is something, it's a place where you grow vegetables, period. The rest is the yard. Right?
Yeah, I've definitely heard that distinction. And I think for myself, I'll usually talk about, the vegetable garden. Like if I'm telling my husband, hey, I'm going to go out and work in the garden, I'd be like, I'm going to work in the vegetable garden. I'm going to work in the native plant garden. Not that my property is so big we couldn't find each other, but, you know, just to have that, I do tend to specify, but I rarely say I'm going to go out and work in the yard. Do you?
I rarely say I'm going out to work in the yard. Yes, you play in the yard.
Yeah, that's where you're playing Frisbee and croquet and all that good stuff.
Well, we've got a great word of the day today, but before I move on to word of the day, again, I want to mention we talked about GF, garden fatigue, but want to remind folks that this is the perfect time of the year to plant perennials and bulbs and shrubs and trees and do some of that yard work that you need to do. It's the perfect time of the year for that. At this time of the year also, I see a tree turning color that I just love, and that's the sassafras tree. And that brings us to our word of the day, heterophilous or heterophylly. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did, and I'll tell you why.
Why?
Because the key to pronouncing Greek and Latin botanical words is consistency.
Okay.
So when you think about a root word that's in the word you just said, like fill, you think chlorophyll. And as long as you are pronouncing that same particle of speech consistently each time it appears, like chlorophyll and heterophyll, then you're saying it right.
But I'm very good at saying words consistently wrong, too.
Well, one of the first things I learned in horticulture school is there's no wrong pronunciations.
Oh,
there's
wonderful.
only wrong spellings because scientific Latin was never a spoken language. It was only a written language.
There you go. So let's get into heterophylous or heterophylly. And for our listeners keeping score at home, reason we bring this up, sassafras or some other trees or plants actually have different types of foliage on the same plant. And that's fascinating to me.
It is. And, I think it's one of the reasons that, especially here in Michigan, it's probably one of the first trees that young children are able to recognize. I mean, I remember going on nature field trips and so forth with my elementary school and learning, okay, the tree that has the mitten leaf, that's a sassafras. And the one that has the leaf that looks like a mitten but also shows your pinky, that's also a sassafras.
Exactly. There are right-hand mittens, left-hand mittens, double thumb mittens. Sometimes you get a full glove with 5 lobes. Fun to see. But there are, of course, other plants too. I've seen it on holly before.
Yes, holly will absolutely will show different types of leaves. And another plant that is very common to do this is English ivy.
Oh, really?
Yes. So English ivy, the classic sort of trident-shaped ivy leaf, that is a young or immature leaf. And then when ivy leaves mature, they actually turn into just a single point.
Okay.
And the branch, they get much woodier and heavier. And once they develop that single point leaf, that's when they flower.
Wonderful. So we're going to put this word on the show notes on our website, gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. Maybe even a picture of a sassafras too. I got a kick out of this, Stacey, that the world record tree is in Owensboro, Kentucky. The national and world champion sassafras tree, 23 feet around, 78 feet high, 300 years old. They were going to build a road and cut it down, and the owner of the tree, Grace Rash, would have none of that. She had nominated the tree for the National Register, so she met the bulldozers with a shotgun and held everyone at gunpoint until a call to the governor got a pardon for the tree.
Thank goodness, because I have to tell you, my jaw literally dropped. And if you don't believe me, you can watch the YouTube version of the show, because my jaw literally, a 23-foot diameter sassafras.
That's something else, isn't it?
I cannot even imagine it. Sassafras are very ubiquitous, very abundant around here, but they tend to be really small.
Yes.
They tend to be a little bit weedy, kind of growing on the side of the road. And you rarely see one that I would say is probably, even a 2-foot diameter tree around here would be pretty unusual. So to think of something that's over 20 feet in diameter, good on you, Grace. Thanks for sticking up for the tree.
Tremendous. Beautiful fall color. All right, coming up in our final branching news segment, we're going to talk about elements you need in your yard to have a yard your neighbors will envy, and also some things you shouldn't do, like a hint. Colorful flowers and exterior lights, good. Beware of dog signs and garden gnomes, not so good.
What about those wooden signs of people bending over?
Not good. I can guarantee you. But we'll look at that coming up in our branching news segment. Coming up, Stacey's going to introduce us to a tough as a turtle plant, a durable plant. If previous shows have taught us anything, it'll be well worth waiting for. We're going to take a break. Back after this. Stay tuned to the Gardening Simplified show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show. I'm Stacey Hervella, and joining me here in the studio is Rick Weist. Welcome to today's Plant on Trial. Now, every time I pick a plant on trial, we have about 325 varieties in the Proven Winners Color Choice line. So it's not an easy task which one I'm going to pick, but you, Rick, made my job very, very easy today.
Thank you.
because I said I'm going to take Rick's word of the day, heterophyll or heterophylly, and I am going to talk about a plant. I'm going to put a plant on trial that exhibits heterophylly.
I did not know that a juniper was heterophilous.
It is. They all are. And so the plant today is Tortuga juniper. That's why Rick got that little crack in there about the tortoise. Tortuga juniper. And yes, junipers do exhibit heterophylly. And heterophylly can exhibit it itself in the way that Rick described, in a single tree like a sassafras having different shapes of leaves. But heterophylly can also exhibit itself based on leaf maturity. So with a juniper, and a lot of us have come into contact with junipers in our time, they're a very common landscape plant. Now, have you ever worked with a juniper and went, ouch, it's so prickly?
Can I tell you a quick story?
You
When
sure
I
can.
started in the garden center industry over 40 years ago, one of my jobs was to unload evergreen trucks. And many of those trucks were loaded with big, heavy, balled-in burlap. That's how they had the roots wrapped. Pfister junipers and Andorra junipers. And Stacey, my arms, the rash that would break out on my, just prickly little buggers.
They are, but it's only the juvenile foliage on junipers that is prickly. As the foliage matures, it takes on that scaly, sort of almost seaweedy kind of appearance. And if you think about this from an evolutionary or survival perspective, that makes perfect sense, because when a plant puts out new growth, it's very soft, it's very tender, and it's much more susceptible to predation from a deer or a rabbit or
Makes
whatever.
sense. Yeah.
But if it makes that tender new growth super prickly, all of a sudden it becomes a lot less appealing to those plant predators. And as that growth matures and becomes much thicker and woodier and stronger in scent and fibers, then it becomes less appealing and they don't need the prickles anymore.
No, it's fascinating you mention that, because I think, just a guess on my part, that hollies would do the same thing. Maybe, maybe not. But sometimes that new growth at the top of the plant that is less susceptible is more rounded than the prickly leaves on new growth or at the more reachable part of the plant. Just a theory in my mind.
That's exactly it.
I can't back it up, but a theory.
It is definitely a predation strategy, and plants don't have a lot of predation strategies. They can't run. They can't really hide. They can't do too much, but what they can do is change their leaf form to be a little bit less appealing to predators. So that's what we're talking about with not just Tortuga juniper, today's plant on trial, but almost any juniper that you're going to grow. Now, Tortuga juniper does kind of, sort of, if you have a good imagination, resemble a turtle. It's got a beautiful, bright sea green color, and it's got kind of a nice little mounded shape. Now, a lot of people dislike junipers for exactly the reason that you described, that they are prickly. And yes, working around them excessively can give you a bad rash, and it can be very uncomfortable. But they're also very durable, and they can easily tolerate drought and heat and sun, and are obviously very deer resistant as well. So we called Tortuga juniper because it resembles a turtle, and because it's very tough, almost like a hard shell that you really can't mess with. And it's a perfect plant for ground cover, for any kind of low planting. So it's not quite a rug style juniper, you know what I mean? Like the carpet or rug style
Blue
junipers.
rug junipers,
Yep,
yes.
classic right there. Tortuga is going to be a little bit higher, but very nice for just kind of planting around the edge of the bed, planting along the sidewalk, anywhere you need something that's going to be very durable and not require a lot of maintenance. And it's also very salt tolerant, so it's a nice choice for lining like walkways up to your house or something like that, where you're doing a lot of snow removal and ice treatment and that kind of thing.
Stacey, I would think you got a lot of people and a lot of listeners interested when you said the plant kind of looks like a turtle. I love that. I looked in the trial gardens on my way here to the studio today and looked at some Tortugas, and I can see that. It's a beautiful, cute little plant. Although when you introduced me to the plant, I already knew it kind of looked like a turtle because I looked up the picture on my shell phone. I'm just trying to throw you off here.
You see, I knew there was a shell joke coming in here somewhere, but I didn't
Adriana
know.
liked that one.
The shell phone definitely threw me
It's a stretch.
for
Okay.
a loop. No, I like it.
Okay,
I like
thank
it.
you.
So Tortuga juniper is a Juniperus communis, and Juniperus communis translates just like it sounds, the common juniper. And junipers are very common here in Michigan. They are quite ubiquitous. And one of the things that you'll notice about junipers, wherever you are, and if you are on the highway right now driving, keep your eyes on the road. But if you're stuck in traffic, you might actually notice not plantings, but self-sown junipers that have popped up along the side of the road. Mm-hmm. And you'll see that they're all different shapes and sizes. And part of that is going to be due to them having occurred at different times. But junipers naturally have just a huge amount of genetic diversity within a single seed crop. So the birds eat the seeds, they deposit them out in wild areas, and then you end up with this really wide range of different shapes and sizes. And so when we're looking at introducing a juniper, so you get all those great benefits, that toughness, that ease of growth, what we obviously want everyone to have is a nice, consistent, predictable shape. Right. So you're just not doing something crazy in your yard. So Tortuga juniper was selected right here in West Michigan for that nice, consistent little turtle dome shape and its beautiful color. And because, of course, it's so tough and useful.
Talk about a tough guy. Black walnut toxicity or deer or roadsides or salt. I mean, no plant is immune from damage, but this is a plant that at least your odds are greatly increased.
Absolutely. And, I think the fact that you do see it so abundantly really points to how much it can withstand. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really good opportunity for you as a gardener or landscaper or yardscaper, however you consider yourself out there, to add this to your landscape and to create, even if you're a really in-depth gardener, you love to garden and play around with different plants and techniques, it's always good to have some old standbys that you don't have to deal heavily with all the time, So I think that Tortuga juniper is a great choice for that. So any sunny spot is good. So I would say at least 6 hours of bright sunlight every day. Part sun or part shade is also permissible. You're looking at about 4 to 6 hours of sun or shade. You are going to want to avoid deep shade, and that's true pretty much of all junipers. They just aren't going to grow very well. They're going to be sparse. You're not going to get the nice color. So shade and wet soil are probably the only thing that Tortuga juniper can't really take. But any of those exposed sites, no problems whatsoever. It's not really going to need fertilizer. I grow quite a few junipers, and Tortuga juniper is a low-growing juniper, but taller junipers are a great choice for a hedge plant in sunny conditions where you have deer. So I think we talked about this before. Obviously, when I need to put in a hedge, arborvitae is out of the question for someone who deals with deer, but juniper is a great second choice. Now, I did want to address a common issue with junipers, and probably the biggest reason that some people don't grow them, and that is the weeds that sometimes grow up through them. Have you ever had that happen to you?
Oh, yeah.
That's rough.
Yeah, that's rough.
I've been a landscaper many summers when I was in college, and you see all that grass and stuff growing through the juniper, and you go to pull it out, and what happens, of course, is that as you pull that grass out, it runs into the juniper branches. You can't get it out. You're getting all scratched up. You're getting frustrated. So I'm going to give you a pro tip here on weeding junipers when those weeds do occur underneath your plant. So you're going to take a leaf rake, like a plastic leaf rake, lift up those branches, and then you're going to go underneath and pull them out. Go low, exactly. So I know that's not necessarily your first instinct. When you see that, you're just going to try to pull it out. But trust me and Rick, from experience, that's not the way to do it. You want to lift those branches up with a rake and then get your hand under there. It's a lot easier to spot the weed, too, and to pull it out completely. So make life easy on yourself. Plant a juniper. Just don't try to weed it from the top. Now, it is still a fine time to plant Tortuga juniper here in Michigan because it is so hardy and tough. You're definitely running out of time to where we would recommend planting evergreens, but you still got a week or so. So if you're headed out to the garden center this weekend, you can ask for Tortuga juniper from Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs in the distinctive white container. So we're going to take a break, but stay tuned because we are going to come back with the Gardener's Mailbag here on the Gardening Simplified Show. Hello, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show with me, Stacey Hervella, and Rick Weiss. And you have joined us just in time for the Gardener's Mailbag because here on the Gardening Simplified Show, it is always our goal to help you be a better gardener or yardscaper or homeowner or whatever that is to you. And so we welcome your questions. And it's very easy to ask us your questions. You can just email us at help, H-E-L-P, at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. or go to gardeningsimplifiedonair.com and use the contact form. You can even attach a picture.
I'd love that.
So
That'd
it's
be beautiful.
Very simple, and a lot of people have attached pictures, which is always very helpful. Rick and I are, I am proud to say, good gardeners, but we are not psychics. So it can be very difficult to diagnose gardening challenges without a photo. So please don't hesitate to include those if you do want to reach out to us. We would love to be able to help you. So Rick, what's our first question from the Gardener's Mailbag?
Well, I do want to mention in regards to the pictures, Stacey, that I did look again at more pictures of Tortuga, and thanks for introducing us to that fabulous plant. I'm going to add that to my landscape.
It's going to do great for you on the lakeshore too.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Okay, let's take a look here. Jim is asking, why are my green peppers brown and rough? Why are my green peppers brown and rough? I feel Jim's pain because I grow a lot of green peppers, and what happens to me is the green peppers don't necessarily turn brown, but they'll turn black. Mm. And in many cases, I find it's part of the process that's not rot, but eventually they will turn that green color. But Stacey, the plant, like tomatoes, can also struggle with something we call blossom end rot.
Right. And so Jim asked about the rough and brown green peppers. Now, Jim did not include a photo, so I did ask him for a photo so that we can, instead of just guessing, hopefully provide him some better, more useful answers. So while we're waiting on that, though, I think blossom end rot is a very common issue, particularly if you are growing these types of plants like peppers or tomatoes in containers.
Yes.
I've seen it very, very common. My father-in-law grew tomatoes in a container. He's been using the same soil for like 4 years. And his tomatoes did not do well this year. He got a lot of blossom end rot. He was very frustrated and tossing them out into the yard with great force because of his frustration. And blossom end rot is basically, I'm sure if you've grown tomatoes, you've seen it. It's a black spot that forms on the blossom end or the bottom of the tomato. And it's kind of a sunken spot, and it's black, and it's really gnarly and gross. And it's believed, a lot of people commonly believe it to be a calcium deficiency, which isn't actually true. Research has found that it is a calcium transport issue. And now you might be sitting there going, well, what's the difference? And the difference is basically just that the calcium is available in the plant. It's just not getting to where it needs to, which is to say the flower buds while the fruit is, or the flowers while the fruit is forming. And this is very common. One of the reasons I think it's common in containers is because they can dry out so easily.
Yes, and our Michigan soils tend to have a decent amount of calcium naturally within the soils. But Stacey, you're so right, within the containers, unless we're supplementing, and there are many fertilizers that do have calcium and other micronutrients available to them. But I think your point's well taken on transport, and that is, from my personal experience growing tomatoes and peppers, if I'm not being diligent as far as the watering is concerned, or if there isn't a good, solid, consistent watering source, if they dry out in between waterings, that's part of the reason I deep plant my tomatoes along the stems. You're so right that consistent transport is important.
Yeah, and I did want to add, Jim, that I had a very strange thing happen to one of my tomato plants this year, and I don't know if it's the same thing you're seeing on your peppers there. But I have two Wapsipinicon peach tomatoes. It's an heirloom variety. It's been a lot of fun to grow. But one of them, every single tomato that has formed on it has had these weird, deep ribs. It's really strange. So not like one of those big Italian tomatoes that's all like kind of convoluted. Mm-hmm. No, it's almost like it just has wrinkles. It's very strange. I don't know exactly what's going on. I mean, all my plants are from the same seed packet. They've gotten the exact same care. So I'm not sure. So I'm looking forward to your picture, Jim, if you are able to send that along. And we will reply to you and add it to the show notes, any additional insights that we have, so we can all learn from your experience. You know, like I said, I think in our first show, every day, really every week, it surprises me how weird plants are.
Oh, no question about it. And the environment, of course, can have a huge effect on cell wall development of fruits or veggies. And, of course, that's going to affect some of our peppers, tomatoes, and other plants from the garden. Larry's asking about his zucchini plants. They only grew a fraction of the normal size. He watered them the same as other seasons, although I did pinch some of the early buds off. Any suggestions?
So this is a great question, and it's hard to say, obviously, without seeing the plants. But my first question back to Larry, I know Larry wrote us asking for answers, but I've got a question back to you, Larry, and that is, did you grow the same variety that you grew before? Because, especially if you're growing from seed, or you're saving seed, you're probably going to be growing the same variety, or you'll know which variety you have. But if you're buying transplants from a garden center, you actually don't necessarily know that the variety, unless you're keeping track of these things, was the same. I mean, not all vegetable tags, if you're going out and buying vegetables at the garden center or farmer's market, are going to be that informative so that you would actually know.
It really does. I think it's a great point. It does happen. It happened to me this year with my cucumbers.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I got, just short, stubby little cucumbers instead of the longer cucumbers that I was looking for. And dealing with those short little guys, it becomes cucumbersome after a while.
Okay, did this really happen, or did you make it up for that?
I didn't make that up. I didn't make it up. It happened.
So my first thought would be potentially that this is a different variety and you just didn't realize it. And there are a lot of dwarf zucchinis out there that are being developed for tomatoes and smaller plots. So that's one possibility. Another issue is squash vine borer, and I love zucchini, but squash vine borer is such a problem for me.
Drive you crazy.
That I've had to give up growing it because it's just, they bore into the stem, and they'll take out the whole plant, but sometimes just a part of it. And really, for me, the old joke about gardeners breaking into cars to get rid of their extra zucchini, that never happens to me because my plants are so, set back from the squash vine borer. So that's not so funny to me.
I fill bags and put them on the neighbor's front porch, ring the doorbell, and run. That's what I do.
Well, you can give them all to me next year.
Okay.
And the other question that I have is, did you get an earlier or later start than you normally do with your zucchinis? This can make a huge difference. And I know we had a pretty cool spring here in Michigan. I didn't get my vegetable garden planted, I think, until about the first week of June. And so I don't know if perhaps that was an issue either. There's so many possibilities. And, it's sort of one of those things when people ask me gardening questions, I'm always like, oh, if only I could just be there and see it in real life. But those are some possibilities. And, I would encourage you, if you have bought plants from garden centers or farmers markets and not been happy with the results, try growing from seed next year. It's very, very easy. In fact, zucchinis are best directly sown into the soil. So you don't have to do extra work or devote space in your house to starting seeds. And then you're getting the exact zucchini that you want.
That makes sense. And finally, Gary writes to us about a hedge of landscape roses. Throughout the years, I've had to deal with this, and I'm sure you have, Stacey, too. It's maddening, where you plant 5 of the same plant, but one of them decides they're going to be a troublemaker.
Yep. And
you got to figure out why.
You do. And Gary sent a picture of his hedge, and it turns out, as is very often but not always the case, that the plant in question, the problem plant, is the one closest to the sidewalk.
Uh-huh.
And, when something is closest to the sidewalk like that, there are a lot of factors that come into play. It could be dogs visiting, walking by. It could be that a delivery truck idled for a long time and just deposited a bunch of exhaust on your plant. It could be reflected heat from the sidewalk. So there's a lot of possibilities. And so I just encourage Gary to go ahead and cut all of his plants back to about 12 inches next spring when it's time to prune roses. Give them all an equal fresh start and then see what happens. And if it's still not working, then look for something tougher to put on the end, like perhaps Tortuga juniper.
Hey, I think you rose to the occasion. Way to go.
All right, listen, with that, we're going to have to take a little break. But when we come back, Rick is going to share with us the branching news, and you won't want to miss that. So please stay tuned.
Thanks for joining us here on the Gardening Simplified show. And again, we want to remind folks, gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. Let's talk. Send us pictures. We'd love to hear from you. It's time for branching news, Stacey, and it's that time of the year. A massive pumpkin was grown by Eric Sundstrom and his family in Harrison City. That's just a little east of Pittsburgh. But here's the cool thing. The pumpkin weighed in at 2,405 pounds, took home the title of King Pumpkin at the Barnesville Pumpkin Festival in Ohio last week.
Well, I would say that is a well-deserved title. Is that a new world record?
It is, by 46 pounds, it says.
Wow. It really squashed the old record.
Ooh, very good. I like it. You're getting it. Go big, gourd big, or go home. Something like that, right?
You know, it's been amazing to me, the giant pumpkin phenomenon. Every single year, the old record topples. Yeah. Every single year, growers are able to get an even bigger, even if it's just by a few pounds, even bigger pumpkin than they had the year before. It's absolutely amazing to see what they're doing.
Amazing to watch. As Bonnie Raitt sang, let's give them pumpkin to talk about. That's why that happens every year. Let's stick with pumpkins here. Delaware, a tractor trailer hauling pumpkins crashed coming off the northbound Route 896 ramp to northbound I-95. 12 hours of traffic tie-ups with a tipped-over pumpkin truck. Now, I'm going to say right off the bat, no one was hurt. The driver's fine. Everybody's fine. But pumpkins shift, and the truck tipped over, and they had to unload the entire truck. It was too heavy. Unload the pumpkins by hand before they could straighten it up with equipment.
So there was very little loss of pumpkin life?
Very little loss of pumpkin life.
So they managed to make it to their destination. The truck was uprighted, and the pumpkins...
I'm hoping so. At the very least, you could say they were caught off guard, by the whole situation. The gourd, the bad, the ugly. Okay. More branching news here. This is from the Florida Keys. Sheriff's deputies in Florida came to the rescue of a deer found entangled in a mesh hammock. Now, there's a lot of people who could relate to that because there's nothing tougher than getting in or out of a hammock.
Yeah, and I saw the video that was included in this article, and wow, that deer had a very rough go of it. I can only imagine the poor thing was frightened half to death. And it took him quite a while. Did you watch that video? It took him quite a while to cut the poor thing out of the hammock.
But I guess the deer's okay. Let's see. Larry?
The hammock's not. The hammock's not. Definitely not. And, you know, when we talk about these branching news stories and they have these wild mental images, I would just encourage you to visit gardeningsimplifiedonair.com because we link all of the branching news stories that we discuss so you can see for yourself and witness the weird, wacky, wonderful branching news.
Well, and you know what? The deer actually taught us a really good lesson because, again, hammocks are tough to get into and out of. Sometimes we're easily swayed thinking it was a good idea. Kind of like trampolines, same kind of deal.
It's true.
All right, a study examining the curb appeal of America's homes. This is something that I want to work with here for a few minutes with you, Stacey. For our listeners across the fruited and rooted plain, the do's and don'ts of a visually appealing home exterior. Results found that trampolines, beware of dog signs, and stone animal statues all counted negatively towards that first curbside impression. I don't know if you agree or not. There may be listeners out there that disagree. They also said garish colors on the house. Well, that's pretty obvious. Tacky mailboxes. Now, many people will try to cover a tacky mailbox with a clematis or an ornamental grass or something like that, right? You'll find that all the time.
You will. And, you know, it's a classic choice. People will actually cover nice mailboxes with the clematis as well. Sometimes I think if people have a really outlandish mailbox, they don't want anything competing with their choice. So, you know, have you seen those ones that are like a fish, like a largemouth bass? And
yes.
Yeah, it says something about the owner, and I like that.
Yeah, it's a personality statement, I guess. So 7 in 10 people think it's unacceptable to walk through a neighbor's yard to get somewhere.
Oh, 100%. There's no the other stuff up to now, I would say it's personal taste, but there is no question.
I struck a chord there. Get off my lawn.
Well, it's happened to me because we didn't really have a fence in our backyard. And so my neighbors would have guests and they would just like walk down our driveway through our backyard. And it's like, it's right around the corner. You could just keep walking. This is our property.
This is
very alarming.
Once again, this week, therapeutic. This is very good. So 7 in 10 think it's unacceptable. And 4 in 5 would never allow their pet to go to the bathroom on a neighbor's lawn.
I mean, you kind of can't help it sometimes, right? I mean, as long as you're cleaning up, what are you going to do? Nature calls, right?
So the top curb appeal aspects, if you want your neighbors to think your home and your yard looks nice and the appeal is great, the top things are a clean house exterior, a well-manicured lawn, colorful flowers are way up there on the list, thank goodness. Weeded flower beds. Now we're back to weeding again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, weeded flower beds. A front porch. A front porch is important. A welcoming, clean, colorful front porch, maybe with some plants, some hanging baskets, and not a front porch that's full of, looks like a yard sale. Right?
Yes, I know that you see those at colleges where they've got the moldy old couch sitting out there.
Exactly. Yeah. And exterior lights are important, potted plants, a nice mailbox, outdoor furniture, and outdoor seating. Outdoor living.
All about that, yeah.
A colorful front door. What does the color of your front door say about you?
I guess if your tastes tend more to the conservative or unconventional. My house needs a lot of work, so I just want to apologize in advance to my neighbors because I'm like scoring badly on all of these factors.
Well, you know what? I mean, all of this is open to debate. Think about wind chimes as an example. Some people love wind chimes, but if your neighbor has a very noisy wind chime,
Rick, you've hit a nerve. Wind chimes are by far one of my biggest pet peeves.
Whoa.
Yes, my unpopular opinion is that wind chimes are noise pollution.
Christmas is coming. I got to make a note.
And I live, like about a mile as the crow flies from Lake Michigan, and so it's pretty breezy most of the time. And I like to sleep in the summer with the windows open, as most people do. And 2 of my neighbors have wind chimes, and it's just not that enjoyable to wake up at 2:00 in the morning to clanking metal that never stops all night long.
Check that one off the list.
And they seem to cite them so that they do get maximum wind. And I'm not a fan.
Okay, so curb appeal don'ts: dirty exterior, unmown lawn, dead plants and flowers. Obvious, right? Tacky mailbox, trampolines, garden gnomes, paper lanterns, fairy statues, holiday lights in July, I suppose, right?
Although it's popular to do like those red, white, and blue lights now. So like not like Christmas lights, but 4th of July lights. Because, hey, if you can sell people stuff for another holiday, why not?
Swing sets. And this was interesting. White outdoor furniture. Got the thumbs down.
Oh, like the plastic kind?
No,
I have a pretty cute white bistro set that's furniture. Metal, but I hope I'm not offending anybody. But, gardening is so much about your personal style.
Exactly.
And, I agree about the trampoline because that is, usually just a recipe for some poor kid getting his, arm broken or something. But as far as most of that other stuff, I believe that your house should reflect your personality and that we all kind of have different perspectives on what that should be. So I'm not really like a strict arbiter of taste when it comes to the outdoors. I'm kind of more of a to each her own.
Well, where I'm going with this is I'd love to see some pictures. Let's see your curb appeal. Send it to us. Gardening Simplified on air.com. Gardening Simplified on air.com. Stacey, we love it when folks send us stuff.
We really do.
All right. Well, it's been a kick in the plants. Thank you very much, Adriana and John Ilk back at the studio. And, of course, as always, Stacey, thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Have yourself a great day. We'll talk to you again next week on the Gardening Simplified show.